I'm Miranda, 35 years old, and I grew up wearing my sister's discarded clothes and eating whatever scraps were left in our kitchen. My mother chose alcohol and men over her children, while my sister Samantha was treated like royalty. I escaped that hell, worked tirelessly, and built a life most people dream about. Now I own a beautiful beach house that represents everything I've overcome. Last month, Samantha called out of the blue asking to use it for vacation. After 20 years of her cruelty, I finally said no. Before I share my story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if you believe in the power of rising above your circumstances. Growing up in the Pinewood apartments on the east side of Detroit wasn't just difficult, it was a daily battle for survival. Our building was infamous for its crumbling facade, the constant smell of urine in the stairwells, and occasional gunshots that served as our neighborhood lullaby. The two-bedroom apartment we called home had peeling wallpaper, water stains marking the ceiling like ugly brown continents, and windows that rattled when the wind blew. This was my world until I was 17. My mother, Catherine, was beautiful once, at least that's what the faded photographs suggested. By the time I was forming conscious memories, she was already deep into her relationship with alcohol. Jack Daniels was her most consistent partner, though there was a rotating cast of men who would stay for weeks or months before disappearing. Mom worked sporadically as a waitress at a diner, but most of her income came from child support, which rarely went toward us children, and whatever her boyfriends contributed. Samantha was 3 years older than me and, for reasons I'll never understand, Mom's clear favorite. Maybe it was because Samantha looked just like her, with the same auburn hair and green eyes, while I took after my father with dark hair and features that Mom said reminded her too much of him. Whatever the reason, the difference in how we were treated was as clear as the line between the bad and good parts of town. When I was 6, I remember watching Mom take Samantha shopping for new school clothes. They spent an entire Saturday at the mall, returning with bags from stores I wouldn't dare dream of entering. That same year, I got a trash bag filled with Samantha's outgrown clothes, many stained or torn. "These should fit you now," Mom said, dropping the black plastic bag in front of me while she and Samantha unpacked new treasures on the couch. I remember pulling out a pink shirt with a permanent grape juice stain across the front and jeans with holes in both knees, not the fashionable kind, but the worn-through kind. My first day of first grade, I wore a faded purple dress that had once been Samantha's. The other kids had new backpacks and lunchboxes with cartoon characters. I carried my supplies in a plastic grocery bag and brought a sandwich wrapped in a paper towel. The teacher, Mrs. Wilson, looked at me with that mixture of pity and concern that would become all too familiar. "Your dress is pretty," she said kindly, though her eyes said something different. At home, Samantha quickly established the hierarchy. When her friends came over, I was invisible. "Go play in the bedroom," she'd command, and when I didn't move fast enough, she'd add, "Nobody wants you here anyway, you look like a homeless person." I learned to make myself scarce, retreating to the bedroom we shared where I'd read books borrowed from the school library. Reading became my escape, the only place where I could be somewhere else, be someone else. Characters in books became my friends when real ones were hard to come by. By age 8, I developed a quiet, studious personality. Teachers noticed my intelligence, even if my mother didn't. I turned in assignments early, raised my hand for every question, and stayed after class to help clean the blackboard. School became my sanctuary, the one place where I could excel without Samantha's shadow looming over me. My 10th birthday crystallized the difference in how we were valued in our family. Mom had forgotten it entirely until I mentioned it at breakfast. "Oh," she said, glancing up from her coffee, which I strongly suspected contained more than just caffeine. "We'll get cake later." Later never came. That evening, she left with her boyfriend du jour, leaving $20 for pizza. Samantha invited 2 friends over, ordered the pizza, and they ate almost all of it, leaving me one cold slice. I sat at the kitchen table alone, no cake, no presents, no celebration. 2 months later was Samantha's 13th birthday. Mom took the day off work, decorated the apartment, ordered a custom cake, and bought Samantha a new stereo system, a luxury we definitely couldn't afford. I was instructed to stay out of the way during her party. "Don't embarrass your sister," Mom warned. "And for God's sake, change out of those ratty clothes." The irony that the ratty clothes were Samantha's hand-me-downs was apparently lost on her. There was one bright spot during those early years: my fourth-grade teacher, Miss Thomas. She noticed how I devoured books and stayed late after school, seemingly in no hurry to get home. One day, she gave me a journal with a lock and key. "You have important things to say, Miranda," she told me. "Sometimes when we can't say them out loud, we need to write them down." That journal became my confidant, the one place I could express my feelings about my mother's neglect and Samantha's cruelty. Ms. Thomas also recommended me for the gifted program, which meant 2 days a week I got to leave my regular classroom for challenging activities with other bright kids. It was there I first dared to dream about college. About a future different from the one that seemed predestined by my zip code and family circumstances. I made my first real friend in that program, a girl named Jessica, who didn't care that my clothes were secondhand or that I couldn't invite her to my apartment. We bonded over our love of mathematics and our shared dream of becoming successful businesswomen someday. Jessica's mother sometimes invited me for dinner, and those evenings in their modest but loving home gave me my first glimpse of what family could be. At home, I began developing small acts of resistance. When Samantha was particularly cruel, I'd secretly rearrange items on her dresser, knowing her obsession with order would drive her crazy. I started hiding small amounts of the grocery money Mom occasionally gave me, tucking the bills inside the binding of my favorite book. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning of my escape fund, a concrete step toward the day I could leave this hell behind. By 13, I'd grown acutely aware of the gaping inequality between Samantha and me. What had seemed simply unfair as a child now revealed itself as systematic favoritism verging on emotional abuse. The contrast between our lives within the same household became more pronounced with each passing month. Samantha, now 16, had blossomed into what my mother called a real beauty, with her auburn hair professionally highlighted and a wardrobe that expanded with each boyfriend Mom brought home who wanted to impress the family. Meanwhile, I continued to inherit whatever Samantha discarded, often clothes she had deliberately damaged before passing them down. One particularly vivid memory from this time: our bathroom trash can overflowing with perfectly good makeup that Samantha had thrown away after receiving newer, more expensive brands. When I fished out an barely used eyeshadow palette, Samantha caught me and slapped it from my hand. "That's garbage, Miranda." "Just like those clothes you're wearing," she sneered. "But I guess garbage suits garbage, right?" Her words stung. But I had learned to internalize the pain, to pack it away in a mental box I'd examine later in my journal. That journal, my third one by then, was hidden beneath a loose floorboard under my bed, the only place my possessions were safe from Samantha's meddling. The clothing situation became a monthly ritual of humiliation. Samantha would fill trash bags with clothes she no longer wanted, some still with tags attached, and Mom would tell me to go shopping through the bags before they donated whatever remained. I'd wait until they were both out of the apartment, then meticulously sort through each item, looking for anything that might fit me and wasn't obviously stained or torn. On rare occasions, I'd find something nearly new, perhaps a sweater Samantha had worn once before deciding the color didn't suit her, or jeans that were suddenly so last season. These discoveries felt like winning the lottery, though I learned quickly not to show too much enthusiasm. Any item I appeared to particularly value had a way of mysteriously disappearing or getting damaged. Food became another battlefield in our home. By this time, Mom's drinking had progressed to the point where cooking was a rare occurrence. Most nights, she and Samantha would order takeout, pizza, Chinese food, or burgers, while I was left to scavenge from whatever remained in the refrigerator. "We didn't know when you'd be home from the library," was the standard excuse, though they never called to check. And my schedule was entirely predictable. I became adept at creating meals from scraps, stale bread transformed into French toast, wilted vegetables salvaged for soup. Creative combinations of condiments to make bland food palatable. I taught myself to cook from outdated library books, turning necessity into a skill that would later serve me well. At 14, I got my first official job at the local library, shelving books for minimum wage after school and on weekends. The library had always been my sanctuary, and now it also provided me with a modest income. I carefully saved most of what I earned, hiding cash in various books throughout the apartment, never keeping too much in any single location. Samantha had a habit of borrowing money from my room whenever she felt entitled to something I had. My job gave me more than just financial independence. It gave me purpose and refuge. Mrs. Harper, the head librarian, recognized my intelligence and work ethic, often recommending books she thought would challenge me intellectually. Under her guidance, I began reading about finance, business, and entrepreneurship. While other teens read magazines about celebrities and fashion, I devoured biographies of self-made millionaires and articles about investing. "You have a good head for business," Mrs. Harper told me after finding me engrossed in a book about the stock market. "Keep developing that mind of yours, it's your ticket out." As my horizons expanded through books and work, Samantha seemed increasingly determined to crush any sign of my independence or success. When she discovered I'd been saving money, she told Mom I was probably doing something illegal to earn it. When my report card came back with straight A's, she dismissed it as teacher's pet syndrome rather than actual intelligence. "Nobody likes a know-it-all," she told me when I excitedly showed Mom my perfect grades. "Especially one who looks like she dresses out of a dumpster." Mom just sighed and asked if either of us had seen her phone charger, more concerned with her next call than with either her daughter's achievements or cruelty. The incident that crystallized my determination to escape happened when I was 15. I had been working on a business proposal for my economics class, a detailed plan for a hypothetical consulting firm specializing in sustainable business practices. The project had consumed weeks of my time, with research, financial projections, and a carefully crafted presentation board. My teacher had hinted it was good enough to enter in a statewide competition. I came home one afternoon to find my project board torn in half. The carefully printed charts and graphs scattered across the bedroom floor. Samantha sat on her bed, examining her nails as if nothing had happened. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper as I gathered the destroyed remnants of my work. "It was taking up too much space," she said casually. "Besides, nobody cares about your stupid school project. Mom needs the living room clean for her date tonight." Something broke inside me that day, not my spirit, but the last thread of any emotional connection to my sister. I stayed up all night recreating the project from my backup notes, working by flashlight after Mom demanded lights out because her latest boyfriend was sensitive to light when he drank. The next morning, exhausted but determined, I took my rebuilt project to school. It wasn't as polished as the original, but my teacher still entered it in the competition. 2 weeks later, I won second place and a $500 scholarship certificate for future college expenses. I told no one at home about the award. The certificate joined my emergency cash, hidden inside a hollowed-out economics textbook where neither Samantha nor Mom would ever think to look. That certificate was more than just money. It was validation that my dreams of escape weren't fantasy. It was the first tangible proof that there could be a future beyond Pinewood Apartments, beyond hand-me-downs and table scraps, beyond Samantha's shadow and Mom's indifference. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I will get out. I will build a life they can't even imagine. And when I do, I will never look back." By 17, my life had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and preparation. I spent as little time at home as possible, dividing my hours between school, the library job I'd maintained for 3 years, and a weekend position I'd added at a local coffee shop. Every extra dollar went into my escape fund, which had grown substantially and was now hidden in a bank account opened with the help of Mrs. Harper, who had agreed to be my adult cosigner. Senior year brought a whirlwind of college applications. I applied to 17 schools in total, state universities offering generous scholarships, smaller colleges known for financial aid, and a few prestigious reach schools that waived application fees based on my financial situation. My guidance counselor, Mr. Fernandez, had taken a special interest in my case, staying late after school to help me craft admissions essays that told enough of my story to elicit sympathy without seeming like I was playing the victim card. "Your resilience is your greatest strength, Miranda," he told me as we finalized my personal statement. "These schools aren't looking for perfect lives, they're looking for people who can overcome challenges. And you've done that in spades." At home, Samantha, now 20, had abandoned any pretense of continuing her education. After barely graduating high school, she cycled through a series of retail jobs, never lasting more than a few months before quitting over some perceived slight from management. She spent most evenings out with friends or boyfriends, returning home at all hours and sleeping until noon. Mom had given up even the appearance of parental authority, retreating further into alcoholism as her looks faded and her boyfriend roster dwindled. I kept my college ambitions quiet at home, knowing that any success on my part would only trigger Samantha's attempts to sabotage me. I had acceptance letters sent to Mr. Fernandez's office and checked my email only on school computers. By March, I had received responses from all 17 schools, 15 acceptances, many with substantial scholarship offers. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday in April. I'd been saving for months for a security deposit on a cheap apartment near whichever college I ultimately chose. The money, nearly $2,000, was hidden in an envelope taped to the underside of my dresser drawer, a location I thought impervious to casual snooping. I returned home from my coffee shop shift to find Samantha and two of her friends sprawled across our living room, surrounded by shopping bags from expensive boutiques. Music blasted from a new portable speaker, and the coffee table displayed the remnants of what appeared to be an impromptu party: empty wine bottles, cigarette butts, and the lingering smell of marijuana. "You're home early," Samantha said, barely glancing up from her phone. Something in her tone sent warning signals through my body. "My shift ended at 4. I replied, already moving toward our shared bedroom to check on my money. The dresser drawer was slightly ajar, a detail I would never have overlooked. My heart pounding. I pulled it open and reached underneath. The envelope was gone. I stormed back into the living room, adrenaline overriding my usual caution. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. Samantha raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "Where's what?" "My money. $2,000. It was in an envelope in my room." Her friends exchanged glances and quickly made excuses to leave, grabbing their purses and slipping out the door. Samantha watched them go before turning back to me with a shrug. "Oh, that. Mom needed it for rent." We were behind again. "You're lying," I said, noticing the shopping bags, the new speaker, the fresh manicure adorning her fingers. "You stole my money and spent it on this garbage." She stood up then, towering over me in her designer heels. "It's not stealing when it's family. Besides, you've been wearing my hand-me-downs for years. Consider this payback. Those were your discards." This was my future. My voice cracked, the enormity of the loss hitting me all at once. "Oh please, dramatic much? It's just money. Mom will pay you back eventually." As if summoned by her name, our mother stumbled through the front door, clearly intoxicated despite the early hour. She took in the scene Samantha and me squared off in the living room and sighed dramatically. "What now?" she slurred, dropping her purse on the counter. "Samantha stole my savings," I said. "Almost $2,000. I've been saving for over a year." Mom's unfocused eyes drifted to Samantha, who quickly adjusted her story. "Miranda's being ridiculous. I borrowed some money for emergencies, and now she's having a meltdown. Tell her family helps family." "Is that true?" I asked Mom. "Did you use my money for rent?" Mom avoided my gaze, fumbling in her purse for cigarettes. "We needed it." The landlord was threatening eviction. The shopping bags surrounding Samantha told a different story, but I knew arguing was pointless. This was the moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for my entire life, the moment when I finally accepted that no one in this household would ever protect me, support me, Or even simply respect basic boundaries. I got into college, I said quietly. 15 schools, actually. With scholarships. Mom looked up briefly. That's nice, honey. College is expensive though. Not for her, Samantha snorted. Little genius probably got a free ride. Meanwhile, I'm stuck here taking care of you. The absurdity of her statement, when I couldn't recall a single instance of Samantha taking care of anyone but herself, might have been laughable in different circumstances. I'm leaving, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. As soon as school ends. I'm accepting the scholarship at State, and I'm never coming back to this place. Don't be dramatic, Mom said, lighting her cigarette despite the building's no-smoking policy. Everyone fights with their family. This isn't fighting, I replied. This is surviving. And I'm done just surviving. I want to live. I turned toward our bedroom to start packing what little I valued, but Samantha's words stopped me cold. You'll fail, you know. People like us don't make it out there. You'll come crawling back within a semester. I looked back at her, my sister by blood, but a stranger in every way that mattered, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. Samantha, for all her apparent advantages, was as trapped as I had been. The difference was that she had chosen her cage, lined it with stolen finery, and convinced herself it was a palace. I'm not like you, I said simply and walked away. The following weeks were a blur of preparation. I confided in Mr. Fernandez about the stolen money, and he helped me apply for emergency grants to cover what my scholarships wouldn't. Mrs. Harper arranged for me to increase my hours at the library after graduation. My friend Jessica, now headed to a different college, gave me her old laptop as a graduation gift. I found a cheap room in a shared house near campus, put down a deposit with my final paychecks, and counted the days until I could leave. Samantha made those final weeks as difficult as possible. She borrowed my alarm clock so I'd be late for work, used my toiletries and didn't replace them, and once poured water on my history textbook just days before finals. Through it all, I maintained a cold, determined silence. Each petty act only reinforced my decision to cut ties completely once I left. Graduation day arrived warm and sunny. Jessica's parents invited me to sit with them at the ceremony since my own family hadn't bothered to attend, despite the school being less than 2 miles from our apartment. Walking across the stage to receive my diploma, high honors, class salutatorian, I scanned the audience once, confirming what I already knew. No one had come to witness this milestone. Or so I thought. As I exited the stage, I spotted Mrs. Harper and Mr. Fernandez sitting together near the back, both beaming with unmistakable pride. They had come on their own time to support me. In that moment, I understood that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when it matters most. 2 days after graduation, with my few possessions packed in Jessica's dad's truck, I stood in the apartment one last time. Mom was asleep on the couch, an empty bottle on the floor beside her. Samantha was out, as usual. I left a brief note on the kitchen counter. I'm starting my life now. Goodbye. As Jessica's dad drove me toward the university that would become my new home, I watched the neighborhood recede in the side mirror. The dilapidated buildings, the corner where drug deals happened in broad daylight, the bus stop where I'd waited countless mornings in hand-me-down clothes, all growing smaller until they disappeared entirely. I didn't cry. Instead, I faced forward, toward a future I would build myself, brick by determined brick. My first semester at State University was a culture shock in every conceivable way. Suddenly, I was surrounded by people who had grown up with family vacations, birthday parties, and parents who attended school functions. My roommate, Ashley, arrived with color-coordinated bedding, decorative pillows, and framed family photos that she arranged carefully on her desk. I unpacked my possessions in less than 15 minutes, clothes in the drawer, toiletries in the bathroom caddy, and 3 treasured books on the shelf. Is that all you brought? Ashley asked, watching me zip my now-empty duffel bag. I travel light, I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Those early weeks were a masterclass in adaptation. I observed how other students dressed, spoke, and socialized, carefully modifying my own behavior to blend in. I learned that most people didn't grow up checking food expiration dates at discount stores or wearing clothes that had been discarded by siblings. I discovered that mentioning my mother's alcoholism or Samantha's cruelty made people uncomfortable, so I crafted a sanitized version of my background: parents divorced, not much contact. Focusing on my future. Academics came naturally to me. Years of using education as escape had prepared me well for college coursework. What didn't come naturally was accepting help. When my academic advisor suggested I apply for the university's food assistance program after noticing I never ate at the dining hall, my instinct was to decline. "I'm fine," I insisted. "I'm used to not eating much." "That's exactly why you should apply," she countered gently. "Being hungry isn't something to get used to, Miranda. It's something to overcome." Her words stayed with me, eventually becoming a personal mantra that extended beyond just food. The things I had gotten used to weren't normal or necessary, they were obstacles to overcome. I applied for the food program and was approved. I also secured 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at a campus coffee shop, afternoon hours in the university library, and weekend work as a note-taker for students with disabilities. Between scholarships, grants, loans, and my income, I could afford textbooks, basic necessities, and even occasional social outings with new friends. By sophomore year, I had declared a double major in finance and business administration. My professors noticed my aptitude for numbers and strategic thinking, and one recommended me for a competitive internship at a regional investment firm. The position was typically reserved for seniors, but my professor's recommendation and my undeniable hunger to succeed earned me an interview. "You have an unusual perspective," the interviewer noted after I'd answered his questions about market analysis. "Most students recite textbook theories, but you seem to understand the human elements that drive financial decisions." "I've observed how different people relate to money," I replied carefully. "How it shapes behavior and relationships. It's rarely just about the numbers." I got the internship, which led to a part-time position that paid significantly better than my campus jobs. I was able to reduce my work hours slightly, allowing more time for studying and even occasional moments of simple relaxation, a luxury I'd never before permitted myself. During these years, contact with my biological family was minimal. Samantha called occasionally, always when she needed something: money for rent, help with a resume, a ride when her car was repossessed. I provided advice, but never financial assistance, maintaining firm boundaries that she found infuriating. "You've gotten stuck up since college," she accused during one call. "Think you're better than your family now?" "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I replied truthfully. "I just choose to live differently." Mom called even less frequently, usually when she was intoxicated and feeling sentimental. During one such call during my junior year, she asked if I ever planned to visit. "The apartment feels empty without you," she said, her words slightly slurred. "It was empty even when I was there," I replied, not unkindly. "You and Samantha never really saw me." The conversation ended soon after, and we didn't speak again for over a year. Meanwhile, I was building something I'd never had before: a chosen family. Ashley had become a true friend after our initial awkward roommate phase. Her parents invited me home for Thanksgiving my first year, and by my second year, I had my own stocking hanging on their fireplace at Christmas. I met Teresa in my macroeconomics class, and her brilliance and ambition matched my own. We pushed each other academically and eventually became study partners, then roommates, then business confidants. Her background couldn't have been more different from mine: loving parents, private school education, family wealth, but she never made me feel less than for my upbringing. During senior year, I met Daniel at a campus lecture on sustainable business practices. Tall, thoughtful, and driven by values rather than just profit, he asked questions that challenged the speaker and impressed me with his insight. We started dating cautiously. My trust issues made romance complicated, but his patience and genuine respect slowly dismantled the walls I'd built around my heart. "You never talk about your childhood," he observed one evening as we walked back from dinner. Not much to tell, I deflected. I disagree, he said quietly. I think there's a lot to tell. And someday, when you're ready, I'd like to hear it. All of it. 3 months later, I told him everything, the hand-me-downs, the scraps of food, the stolen savings. The consistent message that I wasn't worth loving. He listened without interruption, his hand steady in mine, and when I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or pity. Thank you for trusting me with your story, he said simply. It explains why you're the strongest person I've ever met. Graduation approached with the promise of new beginnings. My internship at the investment firm had developed into a job offer with an impressive starting salary. Teresa and I had begun sketching plans for our own consultancy someday. A dream we planned to pursue after gaining industry experience. Daniel had been accepted to graduate school nearby, meaning our relationship could continue without the complications of long distance. The graduation ceremony itself was a stark contrast to high school. This time, when I crossed the stage to receive my diploma summa cum laude. With honors in both majors, the audience contained people who were genuinely thrilled for my success. Ashley and her parents cheered loudly. Teresa and her family held up embarrassing signs with my name. Daniel whistled with his fingers in his mouth. Mrs. Harper and Mr. Fernandez had driven 3 hours to attend. Even some of my professors attended the reception afterward, offering congratulations and network connections. As we celebrated at a restaurant that evening, my first time experiencing fine dining, I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who celebrated my victories and supported me through challenges. For the first time, I felt something I recognized from books and movies, but had never personally experienced, the warmth of belonging. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I opened a new journal, my 12th since Miss Thomas gave me my first one so many years ago. On the first page, I wrote, "Today I graduated from college. Today, I also realized I've already succeeded at the most important thing, building a life where I am valued. Everything else is just details." The apartment I rented after graduation was small, but entirely mine, no roommates, no sharing, no compromise. I painted the walls in colors I chose, bought furniture that no one had previously owned, and stocked the refrigerator with food that wouldn't disappear before I could eat it. These simple acts of ownership and control healed something deep within me. My career progressed steadily over the next few years. The investment firm promoted me twice in 3 years, recognizing my work ethic and analytical skills. I developed a specialty in helping small businesses optimize their growth strategies, finding particular satisfaction in helping women entrepreneurs secure funding. Daniel completed his graduate program and began working for an environmental consulting firm. His values aligned with his career in a way I admired. When I turned 28, I made 2 significant decisions. I started therapy to address the lingering effects of my childhood, and I opened a separate savings account specifically designated for purchasing a home someday. The therapist, Dr. Lewis, helped me recognize patterns of behavior shaped by years of deprivation and emotional neglect, my tendency to overwork, my difficulty accepting gifts, my fear that good things would be taken away. "You escaped physically," she observed during one session, "but part of you is still living by the rules of that apartment. What would it look like to be truly free?" That question sparked a period of intense self-reflection and gradual change. I learned to accept generosity without suspicion. I practiced saying no to work opportunities that didn't serve my goals. I allowed myself small luxuries without guilt, quality food, comfortable clothes, occasional travel. Through mutual friends, I occasionally heard updates about Samantha. She had moved to Chicago with a boyfriend, then returned 6 months later when the relationship ended. She worked as a bartender, then a retail manager, then briefly for a marketing firm before being let go. She had a talent for landing on her feet, but never staying upright for long. Mom had moved in with her sister in a different state after the apartment building was condemned. According to Samantha, she was the same as always, which I understood to mean still drinking, still blaming others for her circumstances, still living in the past. I sent birthday cards to both of them each year, containing pleasant but impersonal messages. It was my compromise between complete estrangement and meaningful contact, an acknowledgement of our biological connection without reopening the door to toxic dynamics. At 30, with my career thriving and my emotional health steadily improving, I was ready for the next step in building my deliberately designed life. Teresa and I finally launched our business consultancy, focusing on helping small to mid-sized companies implement sustainable growth strategies. We started small, taking clients on evenings and weekends while maintaining our full-time jobs. Daniel supported my entrepreneurial venture wholeheartedly, often cooking dinner on nights when Teresa and I worked late on business plans. Our relationship had deepened into a partnership of equals, each encouraging the other's growth while building something meaningful together. When our consultancy landed its first major client, a women-owned manufacturing company seeking to expand nationally, Teresa and I realized we needed to commit full-time to our business. Leaving the security of my corporate job was terrifying, but staying would mean abandoning the dream I'd worked toward for years. "What's the worst that could happen?" Daniel asked as I agonized over the decision. "We could fail. I could lose everything. I could end up back where I started," I admitted, voicing my deepest fear. "No," he said firmly. "You could never end up back there. That place doesn't exist for you anymore. You've built too much, learned too much. Even if the business failed, which it won't, you would still be you. And that's someone who always finds a way forward." With his words echoing in my mind, I submitted my resignation and dove fully into entrepreneurship. The first year was challenging but exhilarating. Teresa and I worked 14-hour days, building our client base and reputation. By the end of year 2, we had hired 3 employees and moved from a shared workspace to our own small office. On my 32nd birthday, I achieved a goal that once seemed impossible. I put a down payment on a beach house. Not just any house, but a stunning 3-bedroom cottage with weathered blue siding and a wraparound porch, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The moment I stepped onto that porch during the viewing and heard the waves crashing below, I knew this place represented everything I had overcome. The real estate agent seemed concerned about my decision to purchase a vacation home rather than a primary residence. "Most people buy their main home first," she pointed out. "I'm not most people," I replied, signing the offer without hesitation. The beach house became my sanctuary. Located 2 hours from the city where I lived and worked, it offered the perfect retreat for weekends and holidays. Daniel and I spent our first night there on the porch swing, wrapped in blankets despite the summer warmth, watching stars appear over the ocean. "This is really yours," he marveled, squeezing my hand. "You manifested this through sheer determination." "No," I corrected gently. "We manifested this. I couldn't have done it without you, without Teresa, without all the people who believed in me when I was learning to believe in myself." As I approached my mid-30s, my business with Teresa had grown into a respected consultancy with a waiting list of clients. Daniel and I had moved in together, blending our lives with the ease of people who truly understand and support each other. The beach house had become not just my personal retreat, but a gathering place for our chosen family, holiday celebrations with Ashley and her growing family, summer weekends with Teresa and her partner, spring breaks with friends from college and colleagues who had become friends. I had created the life I once could only dream about, financially secure, emotionally rich, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. The scared girl in hand-me-down clothes seemed like a character from someone else's story, though I honored her courage and resilience whenever I wrote in my journal or stood watching the ocean from my porch. I had everything I needed and most of what I wanted. I was safe. I was loved. I was free. And then, after nearly 7 years of minimal contact, Samantha called. The decade between college graduation and my 32nd birthday transformed me in ways I could never have imagined as that determined teenager leaving Detroit behind. Each step forward built upon the last, creating momentum that carried me toward a life defined by my choices rather than my circumstances. My first corporate position at the investment firm laid the groundwork for understanding business from the inside. Starting in an entry-level analyst role, I quickly distinguished myself by working longer hours, asking insightful questions, and volunteering for projects others avoided. My boss, Margaret, recognized my drive and became an informal mentor, inviting me to observe client meetings and providing feedback that accelerated my professional development. "You have something many of our Ivy League recruits lack," she told me during my first performance review. "You understand that nothing is guaranteed, so you work like your job depends on it every single day." By my second year, I'd earned my first promotion and a substantial raise that allowed me to make my final student loan payment, a milestone I celebrated by framing the zero balance statement and hanging it in my bedroom. Financial freedom became my obsession. I tracked every dollar, invested consistently, and maintained the frugal habits developed during my impoverished childhood, now redirected toward building wealth rather than mere survival. When I turned 25, I purchased my first new car, nothing flashy, but reliable and efficiently purchased after 3 months of research and negotiation. Driving off the lot, I remembered the unreliable bus schedule I'd depended on throughout my youth and the many mornings I'd arrived at school damp from walking in the rain when the bus didn't come. The car represented more than transportation. It symbolized control over my time and movements. Teresa and I remained close throughout these years, our friendship deepening into a business partnership as we recognized our complementary strengths. Where I excelled at financial analysis and strategic planning, she brought creative problem-solving and exceptional people skills. Our late-night conversations about business possibilities gradually transformed into serious planning sessions, complete with market research and financial projections. "We could actually do this," Teresa said one evening as we reviewed our business plan for the third time. "We have the skills, the connections, and the vision. What we need now is courage." "And capital," I added practically. "That too," she laughed. "But I've never known you to be stopped by practical obstacles." Our consultancy, which we named Horizon Partners, started small but grew steadily. We focused on a niche many larger firms overlooked, helping established small businesses scale sustainably without sacrificing their core values. Our first clients came through networks we'd built in our corporate roles, and word-of-mouth referrals soon created a waiting list. The decision to leave corporate security for entrepreneurship terrified me despite my outward confidence. The night before submitting my resignation, I barely slept, haunted by memories of financial insecurity and Samantha's prediction that I would fail. Daniel found me at 3 a.m., sitting on our apartment balcony, calculating worst-case scenarios in a notebook. "Talk to me," he said simply, pulling up a chair beside me. "What if this is a mistake? What if we lose everything? What if I end up back where I started?" The questions tumbled out, revealing fears I rarely acknowledged even to myself. Daniel listened without interrupting, then asked a question that shifted my perspective entirely. "If you stay at your current job, will you regret not trying?" The answer was immediate and clarifying. Yes, I would regret it forever. The next morning, I submitted my resignation with steady hands and clear purpose. The early days of Horizon Partners tested every skill and ounce of resilience I possessed. Teresa and I worked from a tiny shared office space, handling everything from client consultations to administrative tasks. We reinvested almost every dollar of profit back into the business, paying ourselves just enough to cover basic living expenses. Our first major breakthrough came when we helped a family-owned manufacturing business restructure their operations, resulting in a 40% increase in profitability without layoffs. The owner referred us to several colleagues, and suddenly our calendar was filled with appointments and our inbox with inquiries. By the end of our second year, we had hired our first employees, an administrative assistant and a junior consultant, and moved to a proper office space. Year 3 brought more growth, 2 additional consultants, a marketing specialist, and our first 6-figure contract with a regional grocery chain. Business publications began mentioning us as an up-and-coming firm with a fresh approach to sustainable growth. Through it all, I maintained the discipline that had carried me from poverty to success. I still tracked expenses meticulously, invested consistently, and lived well below my means even as our company flourished. The habit of saving, once born from necessity, had become a cornerstone of my financial philosophy. While building my career, I also invested time in understanding and healing from my childhood. Weekly sessions with Dr. Lewis helped me recognize how growing up in scarcity had shaped my worldview in both positive and negative ways. Your hypervigilance served you well in dangerous situations, she explained during one revealing session. But in safety, it becomes exhausting and unnecessary. You're constantly scanning for threats that aren't there anymore. Learning to distinguish between genuine caution and trauma responses became an ongoing practice. I developed rituals that helped ground me in the present rather than the past: morning journaling, evening walks, weekend time at the beach house where the constant sound of waves reminded me that life is always changing, always moving forward. Daniel remained my steady companion through these years of growth. Our relationship deepened gradually, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than dramatic passion. He understood my need for independence and never pushed for conventional relationship milestones, allowing our connection to evolve organically. "I've never met anyone who values freedom more than you do," he observed once. "Not freedom to do whatever you want, but freedom to become who you're meant to be." His insight captured exactly what drove me: not acquiring possessions or status, but creating a life of authentic choices and meaningful impact. As for my biological family, information came sporadically through mutual acquaintances or rare direct contact. I heard that Samantha had briefly married and divorced a man she met while bartending. Mom had developed health problems related to her decades of alcohol abuse, but refused treatment. Neither seemed to have found stability or contentment. Occasionally, I felt twinges of guilt about my success compared to their struggles. Dr. Lewis helped me understand that this guilt served no purpose, my achievements hadn't caused their problems, and diminishing my light wouldn't brighten theirs. I continued sending birthday and holiday cards, maintaining minimal contact without allowing toxic dynamics to re-enter my life. The beach house purchase at 32 marked a significant psychological milestone. Growing up, I'd never lived anywhere beautiful or peaceful. Our apartment had been cramped, noisy, and often unsafe. The first time I slept at the beach house, with windows open to the sound of waves and clean salt air filling the room, I wept with the realization of how far I'd come. I furnished the house thoughtfully, choosing items for comfort and durability rather than show. The living room featured oversized couches where friends could gather, bookshelves filled with volumes I'd always wanted to own, and large windows that framed the ocean like living art. The kitchen, my favorite room, was designed for cooking and sharing meals. With a long farm table that could seat 12, the house quickly became more than a personal retreat. It evolved into the heart of my chosen family's gatherings. Teresa and her partners spent long weekends helping me plant a garden along the south-facing wall. Ashley's children claimed the smallest bedroom as theirs, decorating it with seashells and drawings. Daniel's parents visited for a week each summer, his father teaching me to grill on the back deck, while his mother shared family recipes in the kitchen. These gatherings healed something fundamental in me, the belief that had been instilled since childhood that I wasn't worth celebrating, feeding, or accommodating. Each time friends arrived with overnight bags and grocery contributions, each time we stayed up late playing board games or watching the stars, I rebuilt my understanding of what family could be. Professional success continued alongside this personal healing. By my mid-30s, Horizon Partners had grown to a team of 15 consultants plus support staff, with offices in 2 cities and clients across the country. Teresa and I were featured in business magazines as female entrepreneurs changing the consultation landscape. We launched a mentorship program for women from disadvantaged backgrounds interested in business careers, creating opportunities for others to follow paths similar to mine. Financial security, once a distant dream, became my reality. I paid off the mortgage on the beach house 2 years after purchase, an achievement that my financial advisor called unusually aggressive, but that brought me immeasurable peace. I created retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and charitable foundations, distributing my resources in ways that aligned with my values while ensuring I would never again experience scarcity. Daniel and I discussed marriage occasionally, but never felt pressured to formalize our commitment. We were partners in every meaningful sense, supporting each other's goals, sharing our daily lives, planning a future together. The legal documentation seemed secondary to the trust and respect we'd built over years. "I've never believed a ceremony makes a relationship real," he said when friends asked about our plans. "What Miranda and I have is built on showing up for each other every day. That's the commitment that matters." His understanding of my need to define relationships on my own terms rather than societal expectations was yet another reason we worked so well together. By 35, I had achieved most of the goals I'd set for myself when leaving Detroit behind: financial independence, meaningful work, loving relationships, and a home that truly felt like mine. I had conquered the external circumstances that once defined my life and made significant progress on healing the internal wounds they had created. I wasn't perfect. I still worked too much when stressed, still struggled to ask for help, still occasionally woke from nightmares about being back in that apartment with nothing of my own. But these moments were becoming rarer, overshadowed by days filled with purpose and connection. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, as I reviewed quarterly projections in my office, my phone displayed a name I hadn't seen in years: Samantha calling. I stared at my phone for several rings, watching Samantha's name flash on the screen. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to maintain the careful distance I'd established over the years. But curiosity, and perhaps some lingering sense of familial obligation, led me to answer. "Hello, Samantha," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Miranda, you actually picked up." Her voice sounded exactly as I remembered, slightly husky from years of smoking, with that undertone of practiced charm she used when wanting something. "How are you? It's been forever." "I'm well, thank you," I replied, instinctively guarding personal details. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's great. Well, mostly great. Listen, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. We should catch up properly. Are you still in the city?" The conversation continued in this vein, Samantha asking surface-level questions without waiting for detailed answers, talking rapidly about people I didn't know and situations I couldn't follow. I remained reserved, providing minimal information while trying to discern the purpose behind this sudden contact. After 15 minutes of seemingly aimless chat, she finally arrived at her point. "So I was talking to Brenda, remember my friend Brenda from high school? Anyway, she mentioned seeing something online about you having a consulting business and a beach house. Is that true?" I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the sensation that always preceded Samantha's attempts to extract something from me. "Yes, I co-founded a business several years ago. And I do have a vacation home." "That's amazing." "You always were the smart one," she gushed, the compliment feeling hollow after years of her dismissing my intelligence as irrelevant. "Listen, I was thinking, a bunch of us girls are planning a summer getaway, and hotels are so expensive these days. I remembered you have this beach house, and I thought, why not reconnect with my little sister while also having an amazing vacation?" There it was, the real reason for her call after 7 years of virtual silence. "You want to use my beach house?" I stated, not a question but a clarification. "Well, yes. It would be perfect. There's 6 of us, so we'd need at least 3 bedrooms. Does it have that many? And we're thinking the last 2 weeks of July, that's when everyone could get time off work. Would that work for you? You could join us for part of it if you want, make it a real sister reunion." The audacity was breathtaking yet entirely predictable. In Samantha's world, anything I had was potentially hers for the taking, from clothes to money to now, apparently, my home. "I need to check my calendar," I said, buying time to process my response. "Can I call you back about this?" "Sure. But don't wait too long, we need to make plans." "Oh, and is there a pool?" Brenda's really hoping for a pool. "No pool," I replied. "Ocean access only." "That's fine, ocean is even better. Just let me know super soon, okay? Love you, sis." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. 7 years of no meaningful contact. And now she wanted to bring 5 strangers into my personal sanctuary for 2 weeks? The request was so disconnected from our actual relationship that it bordered on absurd. I called Daniel immediately, needing to process the interaction with someone who understood its full context. Samantha called, I said when he answered. She wants to use the beach house for 2 weeks this summer. With 5 friends. His momentary silence spoke volumes. Wow, that's bold. How do you feel about it? Honestly? Angry. And confused. And a little sad that this is the only reason she reached out after all this time. All completely valid reactions, he assured me. What are you thinking of doing? I don't know yet. Part of me wants to say no immediately. Another part feels guilty for having something she wants and not sharing it. Is that crazy? Not crazy, he said gently. It's the echo of messages you received growing up that your needs matter less than hers. But Miranda, you get to decide who enters your space. You created that home as a safe place. You don't owe access to someone who has never respected your boundaries. His perspective helped clarify my thoughts. But I still wanted time to ensure my response came from a centered place rather than reactive emotion. I discussed the situation with Dr. Lewis during our next session, exploring the complex feelings Samantha's request had triggered. It feels like she's treating me exactly the same as when we were kids, I explained. Like nothing has changed. Like the past never happened. Has she acknowledged the past? Dr. Lewis asked. Has she ever apologized for how she treated you growing up? Never. In fact, on the rare occasions we've spoken over the years, she refers to our childhood as if we had the same experience, as if we were both equally victims of mom's neglect, rather than her being clearly favored. And how does that affect your willingness to share your space with her now? The question crystallized something important. This wasn't just about a house or a vacation. It was about acknowledgement of our shared history and her role in my pain. I decided to meet Samantha in person before giving my answer. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our current locations, me coming from the city, her from the suburb where she now lived with a roommate. Seeing her in person was jarring. At 38, Samantha still possessed the beauty that had opened doors for her throughout her life, but there were new lines around her eyes, a hardness to her mouth that hadn't been there before. She arrived 20 minutes late, offering no apology as she slid into the seat across from me. You look good, she said, eyeing my tailored blazer and simple gold jewelry. Success suits you. Thank you, I replied. How have you been, really? It's been a long time. Oh, you know, ups and downs. Currently between serious relationships and jobs. But I've got some promising prospects in both departments. She waved dismissively, clearly uninterested in discussing her own situation. So about the beach house, I was thinking we could arrive on July 15th. Is there a cleaning service, or should we handle that ourselves? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Samantha. Before we discuss that, I want to talk about our relationship. We haven't had any real contact in years. The last significant interaction we had was when you took my savings right before college. Her expression flickered between surprise and annoyance. Seriously? You're bringing up ancient history? I thought we were past all that. We never got past it because we never addressed it. I pointed out. You took money I had saved for my future and spent it on clothes and parties. You never apologized or acknowledged how much that hurt me. She rolled her eyes. A gesture so familiar it transported me instantly back to our shared bedroom. It was just money. And it was family money anyway. Mom needed it for bills. That's not true, and we both know it. But even if it were, it doesn't change the fact that you took something that wasn't yours. Just like you always took or damaged my things growing up. Oh my God, are you still playing the victim? We were poor, Miranda. Life was hard for all of us. She leaned forward, lowering her voice dramatically. Do you think I enjoyed watching Mom drink herself stupid every night? Do you think I had it easy? No, I don't, I said honestly. But you had advantages I didn't. New clothes while I wore your discards. Proper meals while I ate leftovers. Mom's attention and approval, limited as it was. And instead of us supporting each other through a difficult situation, you went out of your way to make things harder for me. Her face flushed with anger. That is so unfair. I was just a kid too. You were. And kids can be cruel without understanding the impact. But you're not a kid anymore, Samantha. You're an adult who has never once acknowledged or apologized for that cruelty. She sat back, crossing her arms defensively. So what, I need to grovel for access to your precious beach house? Is that it? You want to lord your success over me to make yourself feel better. This isn't about the house, I explained, keeping my voice calm despite the familiar anger rising within me. This is about whether we have any basis for a relationship now. You called me after 7 years of silence because you want something from me. Not because you missed me or wanted to reconnect as sisters. Fine, she snapped. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings when we were kids. There, is that better? Can we move on now? The insincerity of her apology was almost comical, delivered with crossed arms and rolled eyes, clearly a transaction she viewed as the price of admission to my property. I don't think you understand, I said softly. I don't need you to apologize to access my house. I need you to truly recognize what happened between us if we're ever going to have any kind of real relationship. And until that happens, I'm not comfortable having you in my personal space. Her expression hardened further. So that's a no on the beach house. Yes, that's a no. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. You know, Miranda, success has made you selfish. Mom always said money changes people, and I guess she was right. This isn't about money, I corrected her. It's about respect. And boundaries. Whatever helps you sleep at night, she retorted. Standing up. By the way, Mom's not doing great. Her liver's failing from all those years of drinking years when you weren't around to help at all. But I'm sure your boundaries will comfort her when she's alone in the hospital. The manipulation was so transparent, yet it still struck its intended target. Guilt flooded me as she stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving me with a cold cup of tea and a familiar ache in my chest. 3 days later, my phone rang again, this time a number I didn't recognize. It was my mother's sister, Aunt Paula, whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. Miranda, it's your aunt, she said without preamble. I'm calling about your mother and sister. Is Mom okay? I asked, genuine concern mixing with wariness. She's stable for now, but the doctors say her liver function is declining. And Samantha is taking it very hard. She mentioned you two had a falling out recently. I closed my eyes, preparing for the guilt trip I knew was coming. Samantha said you refused to let her use your beach house for a much-needed break. I have to say, I'm disappointed. Families should support each other during difficult times. The irony of this statement from someone who had never once intervened during my childhood wasn't lost on me. Aunt Paula, with all due respect. You don't know the full situation between Samantha and me. And while I'm sorry to hear about Mom's health, my relationship with Samantha is complicated by years of history that you weren't present for. Well, I think you're being selfish, she stated bluntly. Samantha has always been there for your mother, while you ran off to make your fortune. The least you could do is offer your sister some comfort during this stressful time. I took a deep breath. Recognizing the familiar family dynamic at play, Samantha as the loyal, suffering daughter, me as the cold, selfish one who escaped. It was a narrative that ignored the reality of our childhood and placed all responsibility for reconciliation on my shoulders. I appreciate your concern, I said, my professional voice kicking in automatically. But my decision stands. I wish you and Mom and Samantha all the best. I ended the call before she could respond, then immediately texted Daniel. The flying monkeys have been deployed. Aunt Paula just called to shame me about the beach house. His response was immediate and supportive. Standing by your boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. Want me to pick up dinner on the way home? Over the next week, the pressure campaign continued. 2 cousins I barely knew sent messages on social media expressing disappointment in my lack of family loyalty. A childhood neighbor called, somehow having obtained my number, to tell me how upset Samantha was. Even my mother left a voicemail, her speech slurred either from illness or alcohol, asking why I was punishing my sister when she just wanted a little vacation. The coordinated guilt offensive was exactly what Dr. Lewis had warned might happen when establishing boundaries with family members who benefited from their absence. When you change the rules of engagement, expect resistance, she had cautioned. People who are accustomed to having unlimited access to your resources, emotional, financial, or otherwise, often respond to boundaries with attempts to make you question yourself. Despite understanding the manipulation at work, the situation still weighed heavily on me. During a weekend at the beach house with Daniel, I found myself standing on the porch at dawn, watching waves crash against the shore and questioning my decision. What if I am being selfish? I asked as Daniel joined me, offering a mug of coffee. What if I'm punishing Samantha for things that happened when we were both just kids in a bad situation? Do you think that's what you're doing? He asked, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. I considered the question seriously. No. I think I'm protecting something important, not just a house. But the sense of safety and peace I've worked so hard to create. Samantha has never respected my boundaries. Having her here would mean constantly being on guard, waiting for the next intrusion or demand. That doesn't sound like a vacation for anyone, he observed. No, it doesn't. I sipped my coffee, watching a seagull dive into the waves. But I do feel guilty about Mom's health situation. Should I be doing more there? What would more look like to you? I don't know. Visiting? Helping with medical bills? I've been sending birthday cards and occasional checks for years, but maybe that's not enough. Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You get to decide what kind of relationship you want with your mother and sister now as an adult. That might mean more involvement than you currently have, or it might not. But whatever you decide should come from a place of genuine choice, not manipulation or guilt. His words reminded me that boundaries weren't about punishment, but protection, creating space to make conscious decisions rather than reactive ones driven by old patterns of guilt and obligation. That evening, I wrote a heartfelt email to Samantha. I explained that while the beach house wasn't available to her and her friends, I was willing to help with Mom's medical expenses if needed. I also expressed openness to working toward a healthier relationship between us, perhaps with the help of a family therapist, if that was something she wanted. Her response came the next day, brief and cold. Don't bother with Mom's bills. I've got it covered. And I don't need therapy to know who my real family is. The message was clear. If I wouldn't give what was demanded on her terms, nothing else I offered had value. It was the same dynamic that had defined our relationship since childhood, all or nothing, with Samantha determining what all entailed. I showed the email to Dr. Lewis during our next session, still questioning whether I'd made the right choice. What does this exchange tell you? She asked after reading both messages. That nothing has changed, I said, the realization both sad and clarifying. I offered connection and support, just not in the exact form she wanted. And she rejected it completely. And how does that inform your decision about the beach house? It confirms I made the right choice. This wasn't really about family reconnection or even about a vacation. It was about having access to something of mine, on her terms, without regard for my feelings or boundaries. Dr. Lewis nodded. Healthy relationships have room for negotiation, for finding solutions that work for both parties. When one person's needs and boundaries are consistently dismissed, that's not a relationship, it's a power struggle. As the weeks passed, the pressure campaign eventually subsided. I sent flowers to my mother's hospital room with a simple card wishing her well. I made a donation to the Liver Disease Research Foundation in her name. I did what felt right to me, without expectation of acknowledgement or gratitude. And I protected the peace of my beach house, the symbol of everything I'd built and overcome from those who had never respected my right to have anything of my own. In the months following my decision to deny Samantha access to my beach house, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions. Some days brought clarity and confidence in my choice. Others brought waves of doubt and culturally instilled guilt about turning my back on family. The aftermath proved as challenging as the decision itself, forcing me to repeatedly examine and reaffirm my boundaries despite external pressure. The ripple effects were immediate and predictable. Samantha embarked on what I came to think of as her victim tour, telling anyone who would listen about her heartless sister who refused to help during a family crisis. My phone occasionally lit up with calls or messages from distant relatives or old neighbors, most of whom had never intervened during my childhood difficulties, but now felt entitled to lecture me about family loyalty. Family is all we have in the end, insisted my mother's cousin in a particularly sanctimonious voicemail. You'll regret this selfishness when it's too late. Each message initially triggered that familiar rush of shame and guilt, the belief that my needs were less valid than others' wants, a message consistently reinforced throughout my childhood. But with Daniel's steady support and Dr. Lewis's guidance, I developed strategies to process these feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Notice the emotion, acknowledge it, but question the narrative behind it, Dr. Lewis suggested during a particularly difficult session after Samantha had posted vague but pointed comments on social media about people who forget where they came from. The feeling of guilt is real, she continued, but the story, that you owe access to your home to someone who has consistently violated your boundaries, isn't necessarily true. Can you separate the emotion from the narrative? This practice became my daily meditation, acknowledging the discomfort while questioning the underlying beliefs. Was I truly being selfish for protecting my peace? Was I obligated to share my resources with people who had never shown genuine care for my well-being? The answers consistently validated my original decision. Meanwhile, I immersed myself in literature about family estrangement and setting boundaries with toxic relatives. Books like Toxic Parents by Susan Forward and Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson helped normalize my experience, revealing that many adult children of dysfunction face similar struggles with guilt and obligation. You're not alone in this. Daniel reminded me one evening after I'd received a particularly manipulative message from Aunt Paula about my mother's deteriorating health. And you're not wrong for protecting yourself. As the weeks passed, I noticed something unexpected. The more firmly I maintained my boundary with Samantha, the more peaceful I felt in other areas of my life. It was as if this single act of self-protection had strengthened my ability to honor my needs across all relationships. I became more assertive at work, declining projects that didn't align with my values instead of automatically saying yes to please others. I expressed preferences more clearly in social situations rather than defaulting to accommodation. I even renegotiated certain dynamics with Daniel, clarifying needs I had previously minimized for fear of seeming demanding. You seem different lately, Teresa observed over lunch 3 months after the beach house incident. More. I don't know. Solid somehow. I feel different, I admitted. Like I finally believe I have the right to exist on my own terms, not just as an extension of other people's needs. This growing sense of authenticity extended to how I handled my mother's illness as well. Rather than being manipulated into the caretaking role Samantha tried to shame me into, I made conscious choices about my involvement. I contacted Mom's doctors directly to understand her condition and prognosis. I arranged for a hospital social worker to assess her needs and connect her with appropriate resources. I set up automatic payments for certain medical expenses not covered by insurance. What I didn't do was rush to her bedside with dramatic declarations of forgiveness or subject myself to Samantha's narrative control of the situation. My support was practical, financial, and, most importantly, defined by my terms rather than others' expectations. Mom's health stabilized eventually, though the years of alcohol abuse had caused permanent damage. She moved into an assisted living facility, an arrangement I helped finance while maintaining emotional distance. We spoke occasionally by phone brief, civil conversations that acknowledged our connection without pretending the past hadn't happened. During one such call, she surprised me with a moment of lucidity that cut through decades of denial. I wasn't a good mother to you, she said abruptly, interrupting my update about the weather. I favored Samantha. I know that. The unexpected acknowledgement left me momentarily speechless. I don't know why I did it, she continued, her voice raspy from years of smoking. Maybe because she reminded me of myself and you were always so different. So independent. I told myself you didn't need as much, but that wasn't true, was it? No, I replied softly. It wasn't true. I can't change it now, she said, a note of resignation in her voice. But I wanted you to know that I see it. For whatever that's worth. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing to validation I had ever received from her. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, absorbing the impact of her words. They didn't erase the past or heal all wounds, But they offered something I hadn't realized I still needed: confirmation that my experience had been real, not imagined or exaggerated. I shared this conversation with Dr. Lewis during our next session, exploring the complex emotions it evoked. "Does her acknowledgement change how you feel about your decision regarding the beach house?" she asked. I considered this carefully. No, actually. It validates that my perception of our family dynamic was accurate. But it doesn't change the fact that Samantha still hasn't acknowledged her role or shown any respect for my boundaries. If anything, it reinforces that I made the right choice. My relationship with Samantha remained distant. After the initial flurry of guilt trips and flying monkeys failed to change my mind, she retreated into cold silence, occasionally broken by passive-aggressive comments relayed through mutual acquaintances. I accepted this as the natural consequence of maintaining healthy boundaries with someone unaccustomed to limitations. 6 months after the beach house incident, I received an unexpected package at my office. Inside was a battered cardboard box containing items from our childhood home, a few photographs, my high school diploma, and the journal Ms. Thomas had given me in 4th grade. A brief note in Samantha's handwriting explained, "Found these while cleaning out storage. Thought you might want them." There was no mention of our conflict. No olive branch extended, just a box of memories she no longer wanted to store. Yet something about the gesture felt significant, as if she were acknowledging, in her own limited way, that these pieces of my past belonged to me rather than her. I placed the old journal on my office bookshelf beside the leather-bound journals I now used, a visual reminder of how far I had traveled from that frightened girl in hand-me-down clothes. The contrast between the worn paper cover and the elegant volumes beside it told the story of my journey more eloquently than words could. As my 36th birthday approached, Daniel suggested we spend the weekend at the beach house with our closest friends. "A celebration of you and the life you've built," he proposed. The gathering became a treasured memory, Teresa and her partner bringing homemade paella, Ashley's children collecting seashells at dawn, Daniel's parents arriving with a cake from my favorite bakery. Sitting around the large dining table I had carefully selected years earlier, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was, I felt a sense of completeness that had nothing to do with material success. Later that evening, as friends chatted on the porch and soft music played in the background, Daniel led me to the quiet of the garden. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small box from his pocket. Inside wasn't the ring I half expected, but a key on a simple silver chain. "It's a symbolic key to my heart," he explained with a slightly embarrassed smile. "Not that you needed a key, you've had access for years. But I wanted you to have something tangible to remind you that you will always have a home in my heart, no matter where we are." The gesture moved me deeply, not because it was grand or expensive, but because it acknowledged something essential about me, my need for both connection and independence, security and freedom. "It's perfect," I whispered, letting him fasten the chain around my neck. That night, after our friends had returned to their rooms or driven back to the city, I stood on the porch alone, listening to the rhythm of the waves. The beach house represented so much more than property or investment. It symbolized the sanctuary I had created for myself after years of having no safe space to call my own. My decision to protect it from Samantha's intrusion wasn't about property rights or petty revenge. It was about honoring the life I had built and the boundaries necessary to maintain it. In the months that followed my birthday celebration, I continued to refine my understanding of forgiveness versus boundaries. Through ongoing work with Dr. Lewis and extensive reading, I came to see that true forgiveness wasn't about allowing harmful people unlimited access to your life. It was about releasing the hold past injuries had on your present peace. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself, Dr. Lewis explained during one particularly insightful session. It doesn't require reconciliation or renewed contact. You can forgive someone for your own peace of mind while still maintaining whatever boundaries you need to feel safe. This perspective transformed how I viewed my relationship with Samantha and my mother. I could acknowledge the pain of my childhood, forgive them for their limitations and choices, and still decide the nature of our current relationship based on present behavior rather than blood ties or obligation. I began writing letters to Samantha that I never sent, honest expressions of both the hurt she had caused and my genuine wishes for her healing and happiness. The exercise wasn't about communication with her, but clarification within myself. With each letter, I released another layer of resentment without compromising the boundaries that protected my well-being. My professional life continued to flourish alongside this personal growth. Horizon Partners expanded to a third office location, and Teresa and I were invited to speak at business conferences about ethical scaling strategies. Our mentorship program for women from disadvantaged backgrounds celebrated its first 5 graduates securing positions at prestigious firms, an achievement that brought me particular satisfaction. Daniel and I eventually decided to move in together permanently, blending our living spaces in the city while maintaining the beach house as our shared retreat. The transition felt natural and right, a reflection of the trust and mutual respect we'd built over years rather than societal expectations about relationship timelines. My mother's health stabilized into a manageable chronic condition, and while we never developed the close relationship some might expect between mother and daughter, we established a civil connection based on reality rather than denial. I visited quarterly, bringing books she enjoyed and updates about my life that she received with what seemed like genuine interest. Samantha and I maintained our distance, though the overtly hostile aftermath of the beach house incident gradually mellowed into what I can only describe as mutual recognition of an unbridgeable gap. When we encountered each other at Mom's assisted living facility, we exchanged polite greetings and surface-level conversation without attempting deeper connection. During one such encounter, she commented on the key I still wore around my neck. "That's pretty." From Daniel. "Yes," I replied, resisting the urge to elaborate or justify. She nodded, something unreadable crossing her face. "You got the life you always wanted, didn't you? The career, the house, the perfect boyfriend." There was a note in her voice I couldn't quite identify, not quite resentment, not quite admiration. Perhaps something between the two. "I built the life I needed," I corrected gently. "Just like you have the opportunity to build yours." She didn't respond directly, changing the subject to Mom's new medication. But something in that brief exchange suggested she might, in her own way, be beginning to see me as a separate person with a valid experience rather than merely an extension of her needs and narrative. As I approached my late 30s, the contrast between my current life and childhood circumstances sometimes felt surreal. The girl who once wore discarded clothes and ate table scraps now owned a successful business, a beautiful beach house, and most importantly, a rich network of genuine relationships. The transformation wasn't just external, but internal, from believing I deserved nothing to knowing I deserved peace, respect, and joy. Setting boundaries with Samantha about the beach house had catalyzed this deeper understanding, forcing me to articulate and defend my right to protect what mattered to me. Though painful and challenging, the experience had ultimately strengthened my sense of self and clarified my values in ways that continue to benefit every aspect of my life. I still sometimes wonder if there could have been a different outcome if, given different choices on both our parts, Samantha and I might have developed a healthy adult relationship. But I've learned to accept that some relationships cannot be forced into wholeness, especially when one party remains unwilling to acknowledge past harm or respect current boundaries. Instead of dwelling on what might have been, I focus on nurturing the family I've chosen and created: Daniel, Teresa, Ashley, and the many others who have demonstrated through consistent actions that they value my presence in their lives. I maintain appropriate boundaries with my biological family while wishing them well from a distance that protects my hard-won peace. The beach house remains my sanctuary, filled with laughter and connection during gatherings with chosen family, quiet and contemplation during solo retreats. The decision to protect it from those who hadn't earned the right to share it has been validated countless times by the joy and healing it continues to bring to my life. If you're struggling with setting boundaries with family members who don't respect your needs or acknowledge past harm, know that you're not alone. Your journey toward healing may look different from mine, but you deserve to create spaces, both physical and emotional, where you feel safe, valued, and at peace. I'd love to hear your thoughts on setting boundaries with family. Have you faced similar situations? What helped you maintain your boundaries despite guilt or pressure? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect their peace, even from family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the family that matters most is the one that treats you with love and respect, regardless of blood ties.